The vampire king, Jaximus Zareth, had kept his greatest secret locked away in the highest tower of his obsidian palace for 3 years, and tonight, as the last of the rebel forces fell to ash beneath the moonlight, he would finally bring her into the world that had tried to destroy everything he loved. Penelope Jackson pressed her palms against the cool glass of her tower window, watching the final battle rage across the valley below. She could see the white-haired figures moving like deadly shadows through the carnage, their pale skin luminous even from this distance. Somewhere down there, Jaximus fought for his crown, for his people, for the future they'd planned in whispered conversations during stolen hours. Her breath fogged the glass as she traced the outline of the distant battlefield, her heart hammering against her ribs with a fear she'd learned to carry like a second skin. The door behind her opened without warning, and she spun around, her soft curves pressing against the windowsill. But it wasn't Jaximus. It was Katerina, her handmaiden and the only other person who knew of her existence in this realm. "The war is over," Katerina said, her crimson eyes bright with relief. "Lord Zareth has won. The rebellion is crushed." Penelope's knees weakened, and she gripped the windowsill for support. "Is he unharmed? He's sending word that he wants you prepared. Tonight, he brings you before the court." Terror and excitement warred in Penelope's chest. For 3 years she had existed in this beautiful prison, hidden from a world that would have used her to destroy the man she loved. Jaximus had found her in Boston, working late nights at a diner that catered to the supernatural community, though she hadn't known it at the time. She'd served him coffee with trembling hands, mesmerized by his otherworldly beauty, never imagining that the white-haired stranger with eyes like glacial ice would return night after night until she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love. When the rebellion started, when Jaximus's own cousin had tried to seize the throne by targeting everything the king held dear, he'd brought her here, to the vampire realm that existed parallel to the human world, accessible only through ancient gates that shimmered between dimensions. He'd hidden her away, not out of shame, but out of desperate love. The rebels would have tortured her, killed her, used her mortality and her humanity as weapons against him, but she'd always known what they whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. A human queen? Impossible. And not just human, but fat, soft, and round, and everything vampire aesthetics typically rejected. Vampires prized perfection, immortal beauty frozen in time. She was mortal flesh that would age and die, curves that society had taught her to hate, skin that bore stretch marks and dimples, and all the evidence of a life lived in a body that didn't conform. Yet Jaximus looked at her like she was the moon itself, the only light in his eternal darkness. Katerina helped her dress in a gown that had been crafted specifically for this night-deep emerald silk that flowed over her large breasts, her rounded stomach, her wide hips like water over stone. The neckline dipped low, and the fabric clung in ways that made her feel both exposed and powerful. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, gifts from Jaximus that she'd never had occasion to wear. "You're shaking," Katerina observed, fastening the final clasp of the necklace. "I'm terrified," Penelope admitted. 3 years, Katerina. 3 years of being a secret, a weakness, something to hide. What if they reject me? What if they refuse to accept a human queen? Katerina's expression softened. "My lady, Lord Zareth didn't fight a 3-year war just to let his court dictate his heart. You don't understand what you are to him, what you've been to him." Before Penelope could respond, the tower door opened again, and this time it was him. Jaximus Zareth stood in the doorway, still dressed in his battle armor, black leather and metal that made him look like death incarnate. His white hair fell past his shoulders, some of it matted with blood not his own, she knew. His pale skin seemed to glow in the candlelight, and his ice-blue eyes found her immediately, hungrily, as though he'd been starving for the sight of her. "Leave us," he commanded Katerina without looking away from Penelope. The handmaiden bowed and disappeared, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Jaximus crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled Penelope into his arms with a desperation that stole her breath. His hands roamed over her body, not with lust not yet, but with the frantic need to confirm she was real, whole, safe. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent like a drowning man finally reaching air. "It's over," he whispered against her skin. "It's finally over." Penelope wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling the tension in his powerful frame. You won! I won because of you. He pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face with a tenderness that contradicted everything his reputation claimed about him. Every battle, every decision, every moment I thought I might fall, I fought to get back to you, to this moment. Jaximus, I'm so afraid. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Your court, your people, they're going to hate me. I'm human. I'm not beautiful by vampire standards. He kissed her, hard and commanding, swallowing her protests. When he finally pulled back, his eyes blazed with an intensity that made her feel like the most desired woman in any realm. You will never speak about yourself that way again, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. Do you understand me? You are my queen. You are the woman I chose above my entire species. Your beauty haunts me, Penelope. Your curves, your softness, the way you feel in my arms, I have lived for 8 centuries, and nothing has ever captivated me the way you do. Tears burned in her eyes, but they will accept you because I command it. Because I am their king, and I have bled for this crown, for this realm, for the right to love who I choose. His thumb traced her lower lip, and because once they see you, once they witness the strength and grace and fire that I see every day, they will understand why I burned the world down to keep you safe. She kissed him then, pouring 3 years of loneliness and fear and desperate love into the press of her lips against his. He groaned, pulling her closer, his hands spanning her wide waist and gripping with possessive need. She could feel the hunger in him, the vampire nature that craved her blood as much as her body, but he'd never taken from her without permission, never treated her as anything less than precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jaximus rested his forehead against hers. Are you ready? He asked softly. No, she admitted, but I'll go anyway. For you, for us. Pride flashed across his features. That's my queen. The throne room of the Obsidian Palace was a cathedral of darkness and beauty. Vaulted ceilings stretched impossibly high, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, all of them turning to stare as the massive doors opened and Jaximus led Penelope inside. She felt their eyes like physical touches, shocked, curious, hostile. Whispers erupted like wildfire, voices too low for her human ears to catch individual words, but the tone was unmistakable. Disbelief, outrage, confusion. Jaximus's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise of protection. He led her down the center aisle, past rows of pale, beautiful faces, all of them frozen in various expressions of surprise. At the far end of the hall sat 2 thrones, one larger, carved with intricate battle scenes, and one slightly smaller, adorned with phases of the moon. Her throne, waiting for her. When they reached the dais, Jaximus turned to face his court, still holding Penelope's hand. The whispers died immediately, replaced by tense silence. 3 years ago, Jaximus began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space, my cousin Vladric attempted to seize my throne through treachery and blood. He targeted everything I valued, everyone I protected, in his quest for power. Tonight, his forces are destroyed, and his own head decorates the gates of this palace. A ripple of approval moved through the assembled vampires, but their eyes kept darting to Penelope with unconcealed confusion. During those 3 years, I kept something hidden from you all. Not out of shame, but out of necessity. A secret that would have been used as a weapon against me had it been discovered. He pulled Penelope forward, positioning her beside him so the entire court could see her clearly. This is Penelope Jackson. She is human. She is mortal. And she is my queen. The silence shattered into chaos. Voices erupted from every corner of the throne room, vampires shouting over each other in outrage and disbelief. A human queen? Impossible. She'll die in a blink. What purpose? This is an insult to our kind. Look at her. She's not even... Jaximus's power exploded outward like a shockwave, and every vampire in the room staggered backward, their voices cutting off mid-protest. Penelope felt it too, the raw, ancient force of a king who had ruled for centuries, who had earned his crown through strength and strategy and ruthlessness when necessary. I did not ask for your approval, Jaximus said, his voice deadly calm. I am informing you of a fact. Penelope is my queen. She will be treated with the respect and reverence due to her position. Anyone who challenges this will face me personally, and I promise you, after 3 years of war, I am in no mood for mercy." A figure stepped forward from the crowd, a woman with white hair that fell to her waist and eyes like molten gold. She wore armor similar to Jaximus's, and Penelope recognized her from descriptions. General Seraphine, the king's most trusted military commander. "My lord," Seraphine said carefully, "we do not question your right to choose a consort, but a human queen presents complications. She cannot survive in our realm indefinitely. She cannot bind with you properly. She cannot—" "I know the limitations," Jaximus interrupted. "I have spent 3 years considering every option, every consequence. Penelope will remain human as long as she chooses. When and if she decides to embrace transformation, that will be her decision, not yours, not even mine. Until then, she rules at my side with all the authority that position entails." Another voice, an older male vampire with silver eyes. "But why? Why choose a human at all when you could have any vampire lady in the realm? Someone who could stand beside you for eternity without the complications of mortality?" Jaximus looked at Penelope, and the love in his expression silenced the room more effectively than his power had. "Because she sees me," he said simply. "Not the king, not the legend, not the monster. She sees Jaximus, the man beneath the crown. Because when I am with her, 8 centuries of loneliness disappear. Because she is brave and kind and strong in ways none of you can comprehend. Because I love her with everything I am, and I will not apologize for that." Penelope's throat tightened with emotion. In 3 years, he'd told her he loved her countless times, but never before witnesses, never as a declaration to his entire world. Seraphine studied Penelope for a long moment, then slowly knelt, pressing her fist to her heart in a gesture of respect. "Then I pledge my loyalty to Queen Penelope. If she is your choice, my lord, then she has my sword." One by one, other vampires began to kneel. Not all of them. Penelope could see resistance in many faces, anger in others, but enough that the tide was turning. Jaximus's display of power, combined with his unwavering declaration of love, had made his position clear. Oppose the queen, oppose the king. When the last of the kneeling vampires rose, Jaximus led Penelope to her throne. The moment she sat, she felt the weight of it, not just the physical throne, but the responsibility, the scrutiny, the impossible position she now occupied. Jaximus took his own throne, but immediately reached across the space between them to take her hand again, intertwining their fingers in full view of the court. The first few hours were a blur of introductions and political maneuvering. Various nobles approached to offer stilted congratulations, their expressions ranging from barely concealed disgust to genuine curiosity. Penelope handled each interaction with as much grace as she could muster, hyper-aware of every whisper, every glance at her body, every unspoken judgment. It was exhausting. Finally, when the formal presentations concluded, Jaximus dismissed the court and led Penelope through private corridors to his personal chambers. Their chambers now, she realized with a flutter of nerves. The rooms were vast and luxurious, decorated in deep blues and silvers with an enormous bed that could easily fit 4 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the vampire realm, the dark landscape dotted with pinpricks of light from other vampire holdings. Jaximus closed the door behind them and immediately pulled Penelope into his arms again, his control finally cracking. He kissed her desperately, backing her toward the bed with clear intent. 3 years, he growled against her mouth. 3 years of wanting you, dreaming of you, only able to visit in stolen hours. Do you know what that did to me? "Show me," Penelope breathed, her fear from the throne room dissolving under the heat of his touch. He did. He worshipped every inch of her body with hands and mouth, murmuring praise in ancient languages she didn't understand, but felt in her soul. He traced the curves of her hips, the softness of her belly, the fullness of her thighs with reverent attention, as though she were a masterpiece he'd waited centuries to behold. When he finally slid inside her, they both gasped at the connection, the rightness of it. He moved with controlled power, watching her face with those intense ice-blue eyes, drinking in every expression of pleasure that crossed her features. "Mine," he whispered fiercely. "My queen, my love, mine." "Yours," she agreed, arching beneath him. "Always yours." Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I meant what I said," Jaximus murmured into the darkness, "about the transformation being your choice. I will never pressure you, Penelope. If you want to remain human, to live your natural lifespan and leave me to eternity without you, I'll accept that. I'll treasure whatever time we have." Penelope propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "And if I do choose transformation?" His eyes blazed with sudden hope. "Then I will have forever with you. But it's not an easy process, love. It's painful, and there's always a risk." "I won't lie to you about that. I've been thinking about it," she admitted. "For 3 years, locked in that tower with nothing but time to think. At first, I was terrified of the idea of becoming something other than human, giving up everything I knew. But Jaximus, I can't imagine a life without you. I don't want to grow old and die while you remain unchanged. I don't want to leave you alone." He pulled her down for a tender kiss. "You have time to decide. There's no rush now that the war is over." But even as he said it, Penelope felt the certainty settling in her chest. She'd made her decision long ago, really. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to voice it. The following days were a whirlwind of adjustment. Penelope learned the intricate protocols of vampire court, the hierarchies and alliances that governed their society. Jaximus never left her side unless absolutely necessary, his protective nature on full display. When certain nobles made their disapproval too obvious, he dealt with them swiftly and decisively, making it clear that disrespect toward his queen would not be tolerated. Slowly, grudgingly, the court began to accept her presence. Seraphine became an unexpected ally, the general's initial loyalty evolving into something like friendship. She taught Penelope about vampire history, their codes of honor, the blood laws that governed their kind. "You're braver than most vampires I know," Seraphine said one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. "To stand before the court, to claim your place, despite knowing how they'd react, that takes courage." "I was terrified," Penelope confessed. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Seraphine replied with a slight smile. "It's acting despite it. Lord Zareth chose well, even if he chose unusually." "Because I'm human?" "Because you're human, because you're mortal, because you don't fit the aesthetic ideals our kind typically values." Seraphine's golden eyes met hers frankly. "But I've watched you these past days. I've seen how you handle the nobles, how you carry yourself, how you love our king. You're exactly what he needs. What we need, perhaps. Someone who sees beyond the politics and power games to the truth beneath." That night, Penelope made her decision final. She found Jaximus in his study, reviewing reports from various vampire territories now that peace had been restored. He looked up immediately when she entered, always attuned to her presence. "I want the transformation," she said without preamble. "I want to become vampire. I want forever with you." Jaximus set down the paper slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "Are you certain? Penelope, once it's done, there's no reversal. You'll be vampire for eternity. You'll need blood to survive. You'll be bound to the night. I'll be with you," she interrupted. "I'll be strong enough to stand beside you without fear of assassination or mortality being used as a weapon. I'll have time to learn everything about this world, to truly become the queen your people need. Jaximus, I've never been more certain of anything." He stood and crossed to her, searching her face intently. "When?" "Soon. Before I lose my nerve, before something happens to change my mind or make it impossible." She took his hands in hers. "I love you. I want this life with you. All of it, for as long as we exist." The transformation required preparation. Jaximus explained the process in detail. She would need to drink his blood, ancient and powerful, while he drained her nearly to death. The vampire blood would then rewrite her mortal form, a process that would take 3 days of agonizing pain as her body died and was reborn as something new. "I won't lie to you," he said seriously. "It will be the worst pain you've ever experienced. Some humans don't survive it. I'll be with you every moment, but I can't take the pain away." "I trust you," Penelope said firmly. "I'm ready." They chose the new moon, a night of endings and beginnings. Jaximus prepared a chamber deep in the palace, warded with protective spells and stocked with everything they'd need. Seraphine stood guard outside, ensuring they wouldn't be disturbed. Penelope wore a simple white gown, and her hands trembled only slightly as Jaximus led her to the bed at the chamber's center. Last chance, he murmured, tucking a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. I love you regardless of your choice. I love you, she replied. Change me, make me yours in every way. He kissed her deeply, then bit into his own wrist, dark blood welling immediately. He offered it to her, and she pressed her lips to the wound without hesitation. The blood tasted like copper and power, ancient and overwhelming. She drank until he gently pulled away, his eyes already darkening with hunger. Now comes the hard part, he whispered. I'm sorry, my love. He tilted her head to the side and struck, his fangs piercing the soft flesh of her neck. The sensation was sharp pain, followed by drowning pleasure as he drank. She felt her life draining away, felt herself growing cold and weak. Her vision dimmed at the edges, her heartbeat slowing to a labored thud. Just when she thought she might slip away entirely, Jaximus pulled back. He bit his wrist again and pressed it firmly to her lips. Drink, he commanded. Drink and be reborn. The blood tasted different, this time sweeter, more potent. It burned down her throat like liquid fire, and then the pain began. It started in her chest, a searing agony that spread outward like cracks in glass. Every nerve ending ignited. Every cell in her body screamed as it died and transformed. She thrashed on the bed, unable to control her body, distantly aware of Jaximus holding her down, murmuring words of love and encouragement. The first day was fire. The second day was ice. The third day was something beyond description, a rewriting so fundamental that she lost all sense of herself. And then, on the dawn of the fourth day, Penelope opened her eyes. Everything was different. The world had gained dimensions she'd never perceived, sounds sharper, colors more vivid, scents so complex they told stories. She could hear the heartbeats of guards 3 floors away. She could smell the blood running through Jaximus's veins, could feel the power thrumming in the stone beneath her. Penelope? Jaximus's voice was tentative, hopeful, afraid. She sat up, her movements fluid and graceful in ways they had never been before. She looked down at her hands, still the same size, still soft and full, but now her skin had taken on a luminous, pale quality. Her body had retained its curves, its generous proportions, but everything felt different, stronger, powerful. I'm here, she said, and gasped at the sound of her own voice, richer and deeper than before. Jaximus, I'm here. He pulled her into his arms with a choked sound that might have been a sob. You survived. You're a vampire. You're forever, she finished, wrapping her arms around him. Forever with you. The hunger hit her suddenly, a gnawing need that made her fangs descend instinctively. Jaximus felt her tense and immediately understood. Easy, he soothed. I have blood prepared. We'll teach you control. Learning to be vampire was both easier and harder than Penelope expected. The physical aspects came naturally, the strength, the speed, the enhanced senses. But controlling the hunger required discipline she had to develop. Jaximus was patient, teaching her to feed without killing, to distinguish between need and greed. When she finally appeared before the court again, this time as a true vampire queen, the reaction was dramatically different. Whispers still followed her, but now they carried notes of awe and respect. She was no longer a fragile human to be dismissed or pitied. She was powerful, ancient blood flowing through her veins, her mortality no longer a weakness to exploit. Not everyone was pleased. Lord Cassius, an elder vampire who had opposed her from the beginning, made his displeasure known. Transformation doesn't erase what she was, he said loudly during a council meeting. She's still a turned vampire, not born. She lacks her true heritage. Penelope, who had been learning to trust her new instincts, felt something dangerous stir within her. Before Jaximus could respond, she rose from her throne and fixed Cassius with eyes that had turned the color of storm clouds. You're right, she said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. I wasn't born vampire. I chose it. I chose this life, this realm, this people. I endured 3 days of agonizing transformation because I love your king and I believe in what we can build together. Can you say the same? Did you choose your loyalty or were you simply born into it? Cassius sputtered, clearly unprepared for her to challenge him directly. I am your queen, Penelope continued, her tone hardening. Not because I was born to it, not because I fit your ancient ideals of beauty or heritage, but because I earned it. I survived a war from a tower prison. I faced your judgment with courage. I chose transformation, knowing I might die, and I will spend eternity proving that your king's faith in me was justified." She returned to her throne, her heart racing despite her outward calm. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Seraphine began to clap, the sound sharp and deliberate. Other vampires joined her until the entire throne room echoed with applause. Even Cassius, his face pale with embarrassment, bowed his head in grudging acknowledgement. Jaximus leaned over and took her hand, pride radiating from every line of his body. "That," he murmured, "is why you're my queen." Months passed, then years. Penelope grew into her role, her initial uncertainty replaced by confidence and skill. She learned vampire politics, mediated disputes, and gradually won the respect even of those who had initially opposed her. Her transformation had given her eternity, but her own strength of character gave her legitimacy. She and Jaximus were partners in every sense, ruling together, loving deeply, building a future for their realm. The war was a memory, the rebellion scars slowly healing. Peace settled over the vampire territories, hard-won and precious. On the anniversary of her transformation, Jaximus took her back to the human realm, to the diner where they had first met. It was late night, the place nearly empty. They sat in the same booth where he had first ordered coffee, and she'd served it with shaking hands. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your human life?" Penelope looked at him, her king, her love, her eternal companion. She thought about the years behind them, and the countless years ahead. She thought about the woman she'd been, hiding in a tower, and the woman she'd become, standing beside the most powerful vampire in existence. "Not for a single moment," she said truthfully. "You saved me in more ways than you know, Jaximus. Not just from the war, not just from mortality. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. You gave me purpose, power, and forever." He kissed her there in the old diner, surrounded by the ghosts of who they'd been and the promise of who they'd become. When they returned to the vampire realm that night, stepping through the shimmering gate that connected worlds, Penelope felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. The obsidian palace rose before them, its spires reaching toward the eternal night sky. Their court waited within, their people, their responsibilities. But they also had each other, bound by love and blood and choice. A human girl who had become a vampire queen. A vampire king who had defied tradition for the sake of his heart. They walked through the palace gates hand in hand, the moon casting silver light across pale skin and white hair, two immortals beginning the forever they'd fought so hard to claim. The throne room doors opened before them, and the court rose as one to greet their king and queen. Penelope felt no more fear, no more doubt. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly who she was meant to be with. Some love stories lasted a lifetime. Theirs would last an eternity. And in the end, that made all the pain, all the struggle, all the sacrifice worth it. Because they had won more than a war. They had won each other. And in a world of darkness and danger, that was the greatest victory of all. Years continued to unfold like pages in an endless book. Penelope and Jaximus ruled with wisdom and strength, their bond deepening with each passing decade. The court that had once questioned her now looked to her as a symbol of transformation and resilience. She became known not just as the human who became queen, but as a leader in her own right, fair, fierce, and utterly devoted to her people. She never forgot where she came from. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she would remember the girl who served coffee in a Boston diner, who hated her reflection, who couldn't imagine anyone loving her the way Jaximus did. That girl seemed like a stranger now, yet Penelope carried her memory with tenderness, a reminder of the journey that had brought her home. In the centuries to come, their love would become legend, the vampire king who hid his human queen during war, who revealed her in victory, who transformed her into his eternal companion. Young vampires would hear the story and learn that true strength came not from conforming to expectations, but from choosing love with courage and conviction. And through it all, through the politics and the power and the endless nights, Jaximus would still look at Penelope with the same wonder he'd felt in that diner all those years ago. Still touch her curves with reverent hands, still whisper against her skin that she was his moon, his light, his everything. She had been hidden during the war, a secret kept safe in a tower, But she had been revealed in victory, not as a weakness, but as the greatest source of strength a king could possess, a partner who chose him, who challenged him, who stood beside him through eternity. Their story wasn't perfect. They faced challenges, disagreements, moments of frustration, as any couple does across centuries. But they faced them together with the absolute certainty that they belonged to each other in every way that mattered. And on nights when the moon hung full and bright over the vampire realm, Penelope would stand at the window of their chambers and marvel at the life she'd been given. Not the immortality, not the power, not even the throne, but the love. The real, deep, transformative love of a man who had waited 800 years to find her. She had been plus size in a world that valued perfection. She had been human in a realm of immortals. She had been hidden, then revealed, then transformed into something magnificent. But most importantly, she had been loved, completely, eternally, without reservation or shame. And in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. The war was over, the queen was revealed, and they had forever to write the rest of their story together, one night at a time, one kiss at a time, one eternal moment at a time. Their love had survived war, prejudice, and the boundaries between worlds. It would survive anything eternity had to offer, because they had chosen each other against all odds, and that choice had remade them both into something stronger, something beautiful, something eternal, the vampire king and his queen. Hidden no longer, revealed in all their glory, together, forever, exactly as they were meant to be.